Every advisor in Madinah told him to compromise. The year was 632 of the Christian era. The heat of midsummer hung over the oasis of Madinah like a suffocating blanket, but inside the hearts of the believers, a far colder chill had set in. The Prophet Muhammad, the teacher, the guide, the protector, the living heartbeat of their community was dead. For 10 years, the people of Madinah had lived in the warm shadow of divine revelation. Whenever a crisis threatened, whenever a question arose, whenever fear knocked at their doors, they went to him. He settled their disputes, wiped away their tears, and led them through the storm. And now he was gone. In the hours following his passing, the ancient chroniclers recorded that the Muslims felt bewildered, alone, and terrified. In their own words, they felt like sheep stranded on a cold, rainy night, surrounded by wolves. And outside the borders of Madinah, the wolves were indeed gathering. Word of the Prophet's passing raced across the desert like wildfire. Across the length and breadth of the Arabian Peninsula, tribe after tribe broke their pledges. Chiefs who had submitted out of political convenience rather than faith renounced their allegiance. Taxes were withheld. False prophets arose in the north, east, and south, gathering tens of thousands of armed followers. Within weeks, the newborn Muslim state was reduced to a tiny island of belief in an ocean of open rebellion. And sitting on the earthen floor of the Prophet's mosque, carrying the crushing weight of this dying state, was a 60-year-old man named Abu Bakr. He was not an intimidating figure. He was small, slender, and pale, with a pronounced stoop that made him look older than his years. His beard was dyed, his clothes were simple and patched, and he was known throughout Mecca and Madinah as a gentle, tender-hearted soul who broke into tears at the sound of the Quran. Yet this was the man who now stood between Islam and total extinction. The men surrounding him in that council were the elite of Arabia warriors who had braved the arrows of Badr, the carnage of Uhud, and the siege of the ditch. These were hardened, battle-tested veterans. And yet, as report after report of fresh revolts poured into the capital, panic began to creep into their voices. The main army of Islam, the famous army of Usama bin Zayd, was camped just outside Madinah, preparing to march toward Jordan on a mission ordered by the Prophet before his death. The elders of Madinah approached Abu Bakr with a desperate plea. "Cancel the expedition. Keep the army here. If Usama leaves with our best horsemen, Madinah will be left completely defenseless. The rebel tribes will ride in and tear this city to pieces." Among those who stepped forward to make this plea was a man whose very name struck terror into the hearts of his enemies, Umar bin al-Khattab. Tall, muscular, and fierce, Umar was the rock upon which the community leaned, and Umar was convinced that sending the army away was suicide. Think about this moment for a second. Put yourself in the sandals of Abu Bakr. You are newly appointed. You have no hereditary throne, no standing royal guard, no chest of gold. The strongest, bravest, and most respected men in your society are standing over you, telling you that your decision will cause the slaughter of women and children. In our 21st century world, when 99% of your closest advisors, military experts, and political counselors tell you to compromise to avoid ruin, what does it take to stand completely alone? Abu Bakr looked up at Umar. He did not raise his voice. He did not call for guards. He simply looked into the eyes of the strongest man in Arabia and gave an answer that would change the course of world history. "By Allah," Abu Bakr said, his voice trembling not with fear, but with absolute conviction, "even if wild dogs rove around the feet of the wives of the Messenger of Allah, I will still dispatch the army of Usama, as ordered by the Prophet. How can I pull down a standard that was raised by the hands of the Messenger of Allah?" The assembly fell dead silent. Umar bin al-Khattab, who had never backed down from any man in battle, stood stunned, but the Caliph was not finished. When Umar suggested that if the army must march, at least Usama, a 22-year-old youth of freed slave lineage, should be replaced by an older, more noble commander, Abu Bakr leapt to his feet. He grabbed Umar by the beard and shouted, O son of al-Khattab, it was the messenger of Allah who appointed Usama, and you want me to remove him from command." Umar hastily backed out of the Caliph's house. When he returned to the elders waiting outside, he was visibly shaken. When they asked what news he brought, Umar cursed them roundly and said, "May your mothers mourn you. The Caliph will not hear a word of it." On the morning of June 24, 632, the army of Usama broke camp and marched out of Madinah. And as the young commander Usama sat atop his noble war hearse, the Caliph of Islam, the leader of the state, walked on foot beside the horse's stirrup in the hot dust. Usama, embarrassed, pleaded, "O Caliph of the Messenger of Allah, either you mount a horse or let me dismount." Abu Bakr replied calmly, "By Allah, you shall not dismount, nor shall I mount. What harm is there if I cover my feet in dust for an hour in the way of Allah?" He then humbly asked the young general if he could grant permission for Umar to remain behind in Madinah to serve as his advisor. Usama agreed, and the army rode away into the northern desert. Madinah was now completely stripped of its military power. The capital was an open target, and the rebel tribes knew it. Within days of the army's departure, delegations from the surrounding rebel tribes arrived in Madinah. They did not come to surrender. They came to negotiate from a position of overwhelming strength. They had scouted the town. They saw no cavalry, no shield lines, no army. The rebel envoys entered the presence of Abu Bakr and offered what seemed to be a generous, peaceful compromise. "We will continue to pray," they said. "We will remain Muslims, but we will not pay the Zakat tax to Madinah. Our wealth belongs to our tribes." To a modern politician or a practical strategist, this was a golden gift. Accepting this offer meant immediate peace. It meant avoiding bloodshed. It meant keeping the tribe's nominal allies while Madinah recovered its strength. Most of the elders in Madinah urged Abu Bakr to take the deal. Accept their prayer, they advised. Be gentle with them until the state is secure. What was Abu Bakr thinking in that split second? He knew that Islam was not merely a set of private spiritual rituals. It was a complete, unified brotherhood bound by social justice and responsibility to the poor. If a tribe could decide which commands of God to obey and which to reject based on financial convenience, the fabric of the faith would shatter into 1,000 tribal pieces. Abu Bakr looked at the envoys and delivered a line in the sand that shocked both friend and foe. "By Allah, if they withhold even a single rope used for tying a camel a single ounce of what they used to pay to the Messenger of Allah, I will fight them for it. Zakat is the right of the poor upon the rich. By Allah, I will fight anyone who separates prayer from Zakat." He gave the rebel envoys a strict 24-hour ultimatum to leave Madinah. As the envoys rode back to their camps at Qissa, just 24 miles east of Madinah, their eyes gleamed with contempt. They told their chieftains, "There are no warriors in Madinah. The old man is helpless. Now is the time to strike." In the third week of July 632, the rebel forces moved forward to Qissa, establishing a forward base to launch an assault on Madinah. The main army was hundreds of miles away in Jordan. The elite companions were gone. All that remained in Madinah were the elderly, the women, the children, and a handful of men from the clan of Bani Hashim who had stayed to mourn the Prophet. Most men in history would have fortified their homes, locked the gates, and prayed for a miracle. Abu Bakr did something no one expected. He gathered the remaining men of Madinah. He had no war horses, so he collected the city's pack camels, sluggish, untrained transport animals used for carrying grain and water. He placed Ali bin Abi Talib, Zubair bin al-Awwam, and Talha bin Ubaidullah over 3 small columns, and sallied out of the city to attack the rebel camp. For 3 days, minor skirmishes took place. Then, the rebel commander pulled a cunning tactical trick. He kept his men hidden behind the crest of a hill. As the unsuspecting Muslims rode up on their pack camels, the rebels suddenly stood up, hammering violently on war drums and screaming at the top of their lungs. At the same instant, they hurled hundreds of water-filled goatskins rolling down the slope toward the camels. The pack camels, unaccustomed to the thundering din and the sight of dark shapes rolling toward them, panicked. They bolted in terror, galloping wildly back toward Madinah, despite the desperate efforts of their riders to control them. The rebels celebrated. They shouted in triumph, believing they had broken the spirit of the Muslims without firing an arrow. They moved their camp even closer to Madinah that evening, confident that victory was theirs on the morrow. They posted no sentries, laid down their weapons, and slept soundly. They did not know who they were dealing with. Back in Madinah, the Muslims were furious and humiliated, but Abu Bakr did not lose his composure for a single second. He spent the entire night reorganizing his small force. In the darkest hours before dawn, while the rebel camp lay fast asleep, Abu Bakr formed his men into a battle line: a center, 2 wings, and a rear guard. Keeping the center under his own direct command, the gentle, soft-spoken Caliph led his men quietly through the dark. Just as the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon, terrifying roar of Allahu Akbar shattered the silence of the rebel camp. Before the rebels could reach for their swords or rub the sleep from their eyes, the Muslims fell upon them. It was the first recorded night attack in Islamic history. The surprise was total. The rebel formation collapsed into chaos, and those who survived fled in panic all the way to Abrak. Abu Bakr did not pause. He pursued them to Qissa, captured the base, and secured the eastern approaches to Madinah. 2 days later, on August 2, 1632, a cloud of dust appeared on the northern horizon. The army of Usama had returned from Jordan, victorious, laden with spoils, without losing a single man. The capital was safe. The crucible had been passed. With Madinah secure and the main army rested, Abu Bakr gathered the Muslims at Qissa. He did not celebrate. He did not claim personal glory. Instead, he organized the army of Islam into 11 separate military corps, handing a standard to 11 generals, including a 36-year-old cavalry commander named Khalid bin al-Walid. He launched these 11 corps across the peninsula, shattering the apostasy, reuniting Arabia, and laying the groundwork for campaigns that would humble the Persian and Byzantine empires within a single decade. History remembers Caliph Abu Bakr as a man of gentleness, humility, and tears. But history often forgets that gentleness is not weakness. When the entire world was falling apart, when the strongest warriors questioned the path, when every political calculation demanded compromise, it was the softest heart in Madinah that held the firmest line. He taught the world a lesson that resonates across centuries. That true power is not measured by the armor you wear or the volume of your voice. True power is an unshakable faith in your principles when everyone around you is falling to their knees. When Khalid bin al-Walid was later asked about the secret of the state's survival during those terrifying months, he paused and said, "Abu Bakr stood in the days of apostasy like a stance of the prophets. Without him, we would not be here today."